With the Los Angeles Times, I'm Mark Olsen. I'm here with my colleague Amy Kaufman to talk about the weekend in Paul Walker. News broke over the weekend that the actor Paul Walker had died in a car crash in Valencia, surprising many as the holiday weekend seemed to be in wind-down mode. Now, at first, when the news broke, many heard of it through social media, and so at first there was an impulse that it was actually a hoax. People had a hard time believing that an actor so closely tied to a franchise like the Fast and Furious that has to do with car racing could have died in such a way. Amy, were you surprised by the news when you first heard it?
Yeah, I was just as shocked as everybody. I think when TMZ was the first to confirm it, you just saw on Twitter waves of people in disbelief for exactly the reason you said, because it was a car accident, and a lot of people were just shocked at that irony, I guess.
And really what's been so startling, I think, over the weekend is for so many people who maybe don't know the movies or don't know Paul Walker outside of these films, is to see what seems like an extremely genuine outpouring of grief from his fans. The crash site has already turned into something of a makeshift memorial. His co-stars from the film have been going there, seemingly not out of any sort of publicity impulse, but out of some genuine sense of grief. What do you make of the response so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's been overwhelming, and I think it's nice to see. I grew up when Paul Walker was sort of a teen idol. I actually had his poster on my wall, embarrassingly. But he was in movies like Varsity Blues and She's All That, and he wasn't the leading man. He was just sort of a good-looking guy. And then when he got into the Fast and the Furious franchise, obviously those movies were seen by millions of people, but it was still an ensemble cast. So maybe you didn't get a sense of how much love there was out there for him, but clearly it's a huge amount. And I think it's nice to see all the people going to his crash site and showing their appreciation for him.
I know he's been garnering some comparisons to actors such as Steve McQueen or Paul Newman. One director that he worked with compared him to a modern-day Lee Marvin. And do you think that that his performances have been sort of overlooked in the past? I mean, you actually interviewed him at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, I was actually supposed to interview him this week or this month, very soon, which is bizarre, and I wish I had, because it was going to be for this movie called Hours, which was one of the first passion projects he had ever worked on. He plays a dad who's his wife dies in childbirth, and so he's left with this newborn infant who's 5 weeks premature, and she's in an incubator, and of course, it's a movie, Hurricane Katrina strikes at exactly that moment. So he is left in the hospital to sort of save this baby when there's no power. Meaning that he's on screen almost the entire movie by himself, and there's a lot of emotional stuff. He's crying. He produced the movie. He was an executive producer on the movie. He was really proud of it, and everyone who's worked with him said that he was so excited for it to be out there. And weren't you also going to maybe screen the movie in the Indie Focus series?
He had been doing
people are talking about.
Exactly. He'd been doing a lot of promotion and support for the film, and then he, of course, had already begun shooting on the next Fast and Furious film. And while it feels a little unseemly to be talking in such ways, this is a franchise that has brought in more than $2.3 billion worldwide. And so, where does Walker's death leave the franchise, in particular, since he now there's an unfinished film that he was had already begun shooting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen, there's so many reports speculating what's going to happen. Universal, who is behind the Fast and Furious movies, is totally on lockdown. They have barely said anything about this yet because they're trying to figure out what to do. But I've seen reports saying, they might scrap the whole movie. They might try to just work with what they have and use a body double for the remaining scenes. They might have to just do a rewrite. Have you seen all those stories too?
Mm-hmm. I sure have.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously some precedent for that from, all the way back to Bela Lugosi, We Plan 9 for Outer Space, to more recently when Heath Ledger passed away shooting a Terry Gilliam film. And so it'll be a real challenge for the team behind the film to try to represent to do something that both protects the franchise but also seems to honor Paul Walker in some way.
Right, and it's a trickier situation because, of course, the movies deal with cars, and if his character were to exit the franchise in some sort of car crash, there's a whole taste question there, too, that makes it even more difficult.
And that's where we're going to wrap it up. Joining me from Boston is my colleague Amy Kaufman. Here in Los Angeles, I'm Mark Olsen.